founder of Gulf State Analytics, a geopolitical risk consultancy focusing on the Middle East. He joins us from Washington, D.C. Giorgio, thank you very much for your time. Loads of different issues on the table here. Which one do you think is the most important to the US?
You know, there are many issues that Blinken is addressing with his counterparts in the kingdom. One issue that's important is the crisis in Sudan. You know, since that ongoing conflict erupted in the middle of April, the Biden administration has been turning very closely to Saudi Arabia and the UAE to coordinate the response. There's also the situation in Yemen, where we've seen Saudi Arabia and the Houthi rebels moving closer to some sort of a peace deal. Still some tricky issues that have to be worked out. I'm sure that was an important part of the discussion. Also, the March 10 diplomatic agreement between Saudi Arabia and Iran, a lot that the U.S. wants to talk to the Saudis about on that front. Then also when it comes to economic relations, you know, the United States and companies here in America clearly want to play an important role in Vision 2030 as the kingdom diversifies its economy away from oil. And also counterterrorism is definitely another topic that has been coming up in these discussions.
And how about fending off the growing influence of China, particularly, and Russia in the region? The US clearly feels somewhat threatened by that. You know, can Antony Blinken convince Saudi Arabia that its interests are closer aligned to the US rather than to China?
I think it would be very difficult for Blinken to go to Saudi Arabia for 3 days and say anything that could fundamentally change the kingdom's relationship with China. In so many ways, China and Saudi Arabia have been moving closer together. I see these two countries only deepening their ties in the future. I think from the Saudi perspective, though, it's wrong for the Americans to view this as a zero-sum game. The thinking in Saudi Arabia is that the kingdom could and should continue to deepen ties with China and also strengthen relations with Western countries such as the United States. The Saudis don't think that they need to pick sides here. I think it's really the Americans who are viewing this as zero-sum game. Now, when we talk about the economic relations, the energy relations between Saudi Arabia and China, I don't think the U.S. really thinks it's realistic to put any sort of dent there. But when we talk about the security, military, and defense dimensions of the Saudi-China relationship, I think that's where the Biden administration is going to make a real effort to try to pull the kingdom away from China.
And Antony Blinken has also said that better, improved relations between Saudi Arabia and Israel are absolutely key to the security interests of the United States. I mean, why is it so important to the US to try to get some sort of normalization between these two countries?
Next year is 2024. This is an election year in the United States. My view is that all this talk from Blinken and others in the Biden administration about Saudi Arabia joining the Abraham Accords at this point is largely about domestic politics. There's obviously an influential pro-Israel lobby in the United States, and these kinds of talking points are about scoring points with these constituents and special interest groups here in the U.S. For reasons that we could certainly get into if you'd like. Saudi Arabia is probably not going to be joining the Abraham Accords anytime soon, and I think everyone in the Biden administration understands that, this rhetoric notwithstanding.
Giorgio, we appreciate you making time for us here in the news. Our Giorgio Cafiero there joining us from Washington, D.C.